Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Please delete as applicable because the internet is a worldwide thing and so are time zones. I'd like to welcome everybody to the stream, and can I get a wee audio check in the chat, please? Who have we got in? We've got Ragnar Arnspear is in. Resisting the Lies. What about you, chum? Jemima Puddle Duck. Hey up, me ducks. Sansom's in. What about you, Sansom? Glad to have you here. James Hayworth, and it's a duck. Uh, and the audio is good. That's excellent. I'm going to have a cracking stream for you tonight, people. I've got an excellent guest on. I just want to do a wee bit of housekeeping before I bring him in. So, as you all know, big welcome to anybody come over from Bonnie Lad and Amigos News. If you like my show and you're not from there, you will like their show too. So you might want to do that earlier on Saturday evening. Tomorrow evening, we've got Ragnar Arnspear, who is streaming with Chris Dangerfield. And that'll be followed by Scott's Armour. And then on Tuesday, Sansom Communion is having a good guest on, namely me, and that'll be followed by John Davidson. Now, if you're new to John Davidson's streams, he goes on a Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday evening. Really good content, always a good conversation, and that's my guest for tonight. And with no further ado, I'm going to bring him on in. Okay, here we go. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well this weather, and I'm really glad to have you on. We've
Thank
had
you very much.
we've had some good conversations over in your stream, and I'm glad to bring you over here and introduce you to anybody that is not crossover uh, subscriber to both the channels. Oh, and another thing, if you're watching this, in the description at the very top, first thing in the description you'll get is a link to John's channel. So click that link, go over there and subscribe, because if you're not subscribed, you're missing out. That's all the shilling done.
Thanks for the plug.
My pleasure. Uh, I think where we'll start with is, apart from the many things you do, your poetry, your singing, songwriting, and all, you're also now the leader of the Pensioners Party.
Correct.
Yes, I know quite a bit about it because we spoke about that before. But could you just tell anybody that maybe not be aware the basics, please?
The basics is very simple. I had been watching YouTube for many, many years as what we now describe as lurkers, and I was one of them for a long, long time. And I floated from channels to channels, and there was a constant, not demand, but need and urgency for a political party that could represent our views. And eventually I decided that I would have a go at getting an application past the commission. I did have a caveat to myself, which was very simple. If I don't get it first time, then there won't be a second time because I can't afford it. So I sat down and worked out that I needed to produce a constitution for the party. And once
And,
I'd done, sorry,
and a minimum of 3 members, a treasurer, a
I,
secretary, and a chair.
yeah, I didn't know anything because I naively went to the site expecting to find the questions there. But obviously, you've got to sign in before you get to the questions. So I didn't want to do that, not knowing the questions in advance, you see. So I wanted to be as prepared as possible. But I read very carefully everything that was there, took extensive notes, and worked out they're looking for a constitution, so I'd better sit down and attempt to write a constitution, which was my first step. And then I decided to write a membership rules. So I had 2 files. Then I went and logged in, and as you say, you need 3 people. I needed a treasurer and I needed a nominating officer. Now, again, the language here, I thought the nominating officer was someone who was nominating the party leader and the treasurer as being good folk, but that turned out not to be the case. That turns out to be a position in the party. But I didn't know that at the time. And it came later. So I then needed someone in the town, close at hand, to be the treasurer. And so I went to my sister and asked her if she would do this. And she agreed to become the treasurer. And so with that information, I went forward, logged in, and started answering the questions rather. It was quite a difficult process, to be honest. But what surprised me in all of it, 42, and it really did come as a surprise, was there was not a question anywhere in the application about what the party's political position was. Nor did they ask for the political aims and objectives of the political party. They were simply interested in the constitution and my credit card number for payment. So I got through that, but I didn't get through unscathed, because after a few weeks, I got a reply from them saying that my application had been rejected. And again, I was surprised to discover that in that rejection email, it told me what was still required in terms of information. And if I got a new application or a new constitution in within a month, I would not need to pay any more money. So when I looked at what was missing and what they were saying, I realized that most of it I already had written in the membership rules. So what I did was I then simply took my membership rules and put them in the correct place in the constitutional document, tidied it up a little bit. And of course, my training in literature helped me enormously here, because I had a good idea how to set it out, although I'd never done it before. So then I reapplied, and I think it was about a week or so later, I was doing something in the house, and it was, I always remember it was a Wednesday afternoon, and the phone rang. And when I answered the phone, it was a lady from the commission asking to speak to me. And she said that the application was fine, but there was a couple of small points that needed to be added to the application. And if I could get them in to her within 24 hours, she could put it up for further scrutiny on the Friday. And that's how they work. They do this on a Friday. They make a list, it becomes a public list, and then it goes higher up the scale. So that night I sat and added these points that she was asking for and immediately emailed it back to her. I think I did it that night, in fact. And lo and behold, on the Friday, which you can actually see this when you go to the site, there was the name of the party, the Pensioners Party, going up for further scrutiny. And a couple of weeks later, the 20th of August, in fact, I got the email saying that we had been accepted as a fully registered political party, able to stand in all elections in the UK. And that's how I got that through.
So they weren't really interested in the aims of the party or purely the oversight.
That's all they were interested in, was how was it going to be governed, how you were going to have how are you going to appoint leaders and treasurers and secretaries? They were not interested at all in whether you were right, left, in the middle, or up in the air, as far as your political views and objectives were concerned. That surprised me, because I was expecting the total opposite of that.
Yeah, that is actually quite surprising. The other thing is that they were quite helpful, and whenever they knocked you back, they were got in touch and went, right here, there's a bit of a problem with this form, you need to do X, Y, Z. Get that done and we'll get you through the system.
Yeah, they were like that all the way through, because before that point, I had phoned them a couple of times asking very particular questions. And each time I spoke to a different person, and they were incredibly helpful to me. And then I realized, 42, this is called a commission. But I've worked in the civil service 3 different times in 3 different departments over my life. And I realized that this was no different from any other any other government department. It had clerical assistants, clerical officers, higher clerical officers, senior clerical officers, and then into management. It was no different.
Yeah, and they've got a job, and their job is to move this bit of paper from point A to point B, pass it through the chain, and get the administration done.
Absolutely. It's as straightforward as that. Now, since that time, I have also had a live stream with them. And, they have contacted me. Again, very helpful. No problem at all when I answered the questions. Straightforward. Couldn't be any more helpful if they tried. But that came as a real surprise to me. Pleasant one, I may add.
Yeah, that is actually quite a pleasant surprise, because it it wouldn't be what I would have expected either. I've a very limited knowledge of setting things up. Whenever setting up men's rights in Northern Ireland, I knew I needed a secretary, a treasurer, and a chairman, and this and I needed the treasurer, despite the fact that it was set up in a way that there was never going to be any money involved. Like, don't take donations, don't do anything that costs money apart from the internet, which I'm funding because I've got the internet anyway, and the people that were working along with have the internet anyway. It wasn't costing anybody any extra money, but we still needed a secretary.
Yeah, and you mean a treasurer?
Or a treasurer, yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing, because all I had to go on, to be honest with you, was what someone else had been saying. And what that other person had been saying was completely different from my experience.
Yeah. That is quite strange. We've got at least one person in, our POW, who doesn't know anything about your party and hasn't came across you before. RPA, first off, is links in the description. The second one is you came in after would name the party. He's the leader of the Pensioners Party. This seems like a nice segue into letting you talk about a quick run through the manifesto. the basic gist of it.
Right. Well, let me explain straight away to this person. It's called the Pensioners Party, but it's not solely for pensioners. The name is something of an umbrella and a deflection shield. And that helps because of my age, and I am the public face of the party. And we do actually have a policy for the improvement of pensions. And I'll explain that one very simply, because it is simple. The idea is that all state pensions need to be calculated on the average salary in the UK, and the pension should be half of that. It should also be recalibrated into already taxed income so that there is no taxation on it, because presently it's called an income, so you get taxed on it. This really hammers people who have got private pensions, but it does still affect people who are only got a state pension. And if that was done tomorrow, that would lift all pensioners up to somewhere around 14 to 15,000 a year. And that is a flagship for us, not because everyone's a pensioner in the party, because they're not. But part of our little slogan is that we represent pensioners, but we represent all those who wish and aspire to become a pensioner. And that includes everyone. Everyone wants to live long enough to be a pensioner. And therefore, any pensioners' improvements that we can make, you eventually will benefit from that. But it isn't simply set up for pensioners. It is a right-wing party.
Yeah. Talking about the other thing is, I think we need to do something about the actual pension age.
That would be, if we came to power tomorrow, that would be automatically put back to 65 to begin with for men and women. Because you can't see in it, it would be foolish for me to sit here and say, yeah, I want it back to 60. Well, I always did want it back at 60. But you couldn't actually make a proper decision until you were in the job of, say, Prime Minister, to look at all the finances and all the different aspects of what that would mean for people. But I would like it, ideally, to begin with, back at 65 for men and women. And then if and when it's financially possible, once we get the country back into a decent position, get it rolled back even further to 60.
See, I would go further than that. I would be, my dream, and this is like a pipe dream. If I got in charge of the country tomorrow, I would be saying, here's the deal. There's a stopwatch that starts whenever you start working, and you're going to work for 40 years. So if you start at 16, you'll be working until you're 26, 36, 46, 56. If you fart about in academia and then go into a desk job, but you don't start your desk job till 27, that will be 37, 47, 57, 67.
Right.
I would go right. I would also reduce that further by 10 years for our armed forces, first responders, firefighters, etc., firemen mainly.
Well, firemen already retire at 55.
Yeah, I don't want the 60-year-old trying to pull me out of a building.
Oh, for God's sake, no. And you don't want it to be a 60-year-old woman either.
No, definitely not. You know,
and likewise, I don't want a 70-year-old in the classroom in front of 33 children.
Yeah, that this is.
Because that's where we're headed.
Oh, that is madness.
Of course it is. I know I was in education, 42, for over 10 years, right? And I can tell you for a fact, teachers are burned out long before they get to 60. Even the good ones, are burned out. And they can't wait to retire because they don't have the energy that's required. And you do need an amazing amount of energy to stand in front of 33 children all day, every day. And that's what in Scotland, I suppose it's the same where you are, but in Scotland, all the classes in secondary school are running on maximum numbers, which is 33 in a class, and a 55-minute period. How many uh, pupils can you actually attend to in that time?
Our classes tend to be 30. We don't have, for various reasons, we're having problems filling the schools. Partly because the
Well, you don't
popul-
have the enrichment yet. You don't have so much enrichment.
well, not only that, we've also got a dual school system. Our school system's segregated between British and Irish or Unionists and Nationalists. They don't attend the same school in the most place. There are moves for integrated schools, but they're not. They're the exception, not the norm, and therefore you've got schools that are having problems uh, actually just filling the classes.
Yeah, well, in Scotland, it's a division between Roman Catholic and others. And I suppose uh, each has its pros and cons. But let me tell you this, everyone wants the highest possible educational standards. And I can tell you for a fact, because of my experience in the job, the best number in a class in a secondary school is 25. And for science subjects, around 20. The trouble with that is it costs a lot of money, and the British public are not prepared to pay it. They want the top education, but they won't pay the money for it. And that's part of the problem. So, what you end up in Scotland is as the class numbers start to come down, what the councils then do is they start talking about closing schools and shifting people, or shifting pupils rather, busing them here, there, and everywhere. And that's what's happening. And it's been going on for a long time. But if you ask teachers, they will tell you that the ideal number is 25.
Well, the funding in the UK follows the child. Uh, there's a certain amount of funding allocated for each child,
Yeah,
and the school works out its budget by how many pupils it can get into the school.
yeah,
But then here's where it gets all a bit strange. If you are a average pupil, you get 100% funding. If you're from a single family, single parent family, you get 125% funding. If you're from uh, if the child has a statement of some form of problem, ADHD,
mm,
something like that, it goes to 150% funding. And if you're Romani, you get Romani children get 175% funding, and if you don't have English as your first language, you get 200% funding.
mm,
And this has led to a couple of problems. Most namely, most prevalent being the effort to get boys diagnosed with ADHD and underwritten with psych teachers because that funds the school.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. These things are problems. That's why we need a proper government. Why we need a nationalist government to sort this stuff out. I mean, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, we have, and I have often said, a, a potential pupil turning up at a primary school should already be speaking our language. If I went, if I had a young family and I went to, say, Germany, I wouldn't be allowed in the school with that pupil because unless that son or daughter of mine was able to speak German, that should be the rules here. If I go to another country, I have to adopt their language and their rules.
Well, if you're pretty much everywhere else that there are expat British people,
Sure,
they have English language schools that they've set up themselves and
correct.
are not a drain on the host country's resources. Uh, we at the very most we should be having separate education system for people that don't have English as a first language with a sole goal of teaching them English and then thinking about integrating them because what's happening at the minute is reducing the ability of our children to learn.
Yes, yes, of course.
'Cause-
And we've already got problems in the school because in every class of 33, and this is a problem that originates in primary, in every class of 33, you will have at least 8 to 10 boys and girls who are not competent enough in reading, writing, and counting. And they tend to get stuck up at the back of the classroom. And these days, with computers supposedly being able to help them. But my argument is, and I know a lot of people support this view, is we need to get rid of a lot of the nonsense that's being done in primary school and get back to the point where when a pupil is transferring from primary education to secondary education, when they come into the English department, they need to be able to read, write, and when they go into the maths department, they need to be able to count. And that needs to be solidly put into them before they ever get to secondary school. Because an English teacher, for example, which is again my own specialty, doesn't have the time, and nor do I have the training to teach people to read and write. I need those children, those pupils, to be able to do that before they sit in front of me.
yeah, the by the time they get to the level you were teaching at, they're supposed to have the building blocks, and for you to then make the house out of those blocks. The current situation, it's hard to get the up to date figures, but I believe it's around about 30% of white working class boys leave secondary education without any qualification in English or mathematics, uh, which is absolutely scandalous. Uh,
Yeah, and the literacy rate in this country is just going all over the place. It's outrageous. And I blame the primary school. It happened to my own son. We were living in Paisley. I had to move to Paisley for personal reasons and job reasons. And so I married in Paisley for the second time, had a son. And when we were looking at school, the natural place for him to go where we lived was doing phonetic spelling. And I said, absolutely not. Fortunately, my wife was a Paisley buddy, and we looked around and we found a primary school outside our area that taught all the traditional subjects in a traditional way. In fact, one of the teachers had taught my late wife. And so we fought and we got our son into that school. And it was very inconvenient. It cost a lot of money because everyone had uniforms, etc., etc. Now he was doing all right, and every night he would come home with a little bit of homework, a little bit of reading, a little bit of writing. When we moved back to my hometown here in Greenock and went to the local primary school, he spent the last year in primary studying Wales, which did him absolutely no good. And that
As,
just, sorry,
as,
anyway.
as in the animal or the country?
In the animal. So by the time he went to secondary school, as far as we were concerned, he had lost a year of primary education because of this nonsense. As far as I'm concerned, it's nonsense, right? And never made that up. He just never made it up again. And we always kicked ourselves, but
From what I can remember of primary 7, it was a lot of comprehension. It was taking you into long multiplication, long division, and trying to do some prep work for secondary school.
yeah, that's right. That's what it should have been. That's what it would have been had he remained in this other primary school, because they were doing everything in a traditional way. But I must tell you, this particular primary school was in a very affluent area, surrounded by very expensive houses that we could never have afforded to have bought and lived in. So we had to move them in and out. Thankfully, we had the car to be able to do that, and we thought it was worth it, and it was worth it. He was doing fine until we came here to Greenock, I'm sorry to say.
So what are the secondary schools like in Scotland at the minute?
The secondary schools, well, they're all struggling, to be honest, because they're all running on maximum number of class numbers, and that's 33. So, as I say, if you've got a 55-minute period, how many children can you deal with in those 55 minutes? And you've got to remember, they've got to arrive at the classroom. You've got to get them in the classroom and settled as quickly as possible. Now, depending on which classroom they've just come from, they can be high as kites by the time they get to you. So it can take a wee bit of time, and depends on you as a teacher how well you are respected by the kids. Do they listen to you, or do they just ignore you? But I must say, in my own case, I never had a problem with discipline. I used to really walk into a classroom and it would just fall silent.
There's a lot of that also comes from the whole ethos of the school, because you could have one good teacher in a school that's not
Mm.
disciplined, and they're never getting anywhere.
Yeah.
There needs to be a level of constant discipline throughout
Yes.
schools.
Yes. But the other thing that you find in teaching, certainly in my experience, is the incompetent teachers are covered for, and then they're promoted out of the classroom, and they become the bad managers of the school and the bad head teachers.
Well, that happens. I work in a factory, and that would happen regularly. People feel upwards, If they've got somebody that can't do their job,
Yeah.
not long before they're the foreman or they're the lead hand, you don't need to actually do any hands-on work anymore. You just need to organize people.
Yeah.
And also with lazy people, if we can't get work out of you, we're going to send you to meetings all day, every day. It's it is really
Crazy.
yeah, it is.
I worked in a school which will remain nameless, a local school here, and the deputy head teacher, okay, who wore the gown, his full responsibility in the school was to make sure that the staff room had tea and coffee and sugar and milk and biscuits. That was his full responsibility.
Yeah, it's
It's not funny. It sounds funny, and if you did it in a comedy show, it would be funny, but it isn't.
I I'm old enough to know that there was a job in the shipyard called a T-boy for 15, 16-year-olds.
Yeah,
And that's what they did for a year before they were allowed anywhere near any form of a tool.
of course, of course. But they were watching and learning, of course.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, well, when I
Yep.
entered that school, what age would, well, he would be well in his 50s, this guy. It's not as though he was some youngster who had been shuffled up out of the way. No, no, no. He had spent a lifetime in education, and this is where he had ended up. This is how competent a teacher he was. He had no classes.
Oh, like I also knew of kids. There was kids at my school. They were in a stream called non-exams, and they didn't really have classes as such either. But that was because they were either unwilling to learn or unruly or whatever had went wrong. But
Yeah.
at least the school had the sense to go, right, okay, we've got these kids, we'll have to do something with them. The first thing we're going to do is segregate them off from everybody else
Yeah.
and not let that infect the rest of the school.
But you see, that's another problem. That's another problem, and it's a growing problem, and it comes from politicians. Is the idea that, do we stream the classes or do we integrate the pupils? Now, when I was in school, we were streamed into four different classes, and it was simple T1, T2, T3, and T4. T1 being the best, T4 being the lowest. And therefore, the teachers knew what kind of pupils they were going to get if they were taking a T1 class or a T4 class. But you can't get away with that now because of the politics.
Our
Everyone's
schools,
got to be the same.
our school, the school I went to, was streamed, but it wasn't quite as obvious of that. Each form class had the initials of their teacher.
Right.
So if your teacher was John Robinson, you went into 1JR, and that was your form class for first form. And there could be people, and they had tried to group people of the same average level together. And then at third form, which is your well, year 10 in new money, you got further stranded off for individual class. The first year, everybody went the same classes. At the end of year one in that school, you got segregated off into separate maths class, English class, history class, geography class, whatever. with the beginning of the streaming, and then at third form, whenever you were going to pick your exams, uh, you were streamed off further, so that there was some classes did higher levels of exams than others.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was all very streamed. Uh, how far that goes in our schools now, I don't think I don't think it's quite as streamed as that, but we still do have some form of streaming.
yeah.
And then
Oh, sorry, how'd you go?
we also still have grammar schools here.
Yeah, well, that makes a big difference. You have to also remember when I'm talking about me being in school, I left school in 1961, 42. So this is a long time ago. And there wasn't the same hoo-ha from parents because I think people back then were more realistic and recognized because they would probably know their own sons and daughters better, knowing that they're either very uh, bookish, as they might say back then, or not. So the other thing that has to be taken into consideration when I talk about that is if you had been streamed into, say, a T3 class, well, it wasn't, it was T1, T2, and then it was B1, B2, right? So if you were in a B1 class in first year, you didn't necessarily have to stay there because I think there was a recognition, even at our level, and I was in a junior secondary school, that people developed at different ages, and therefore people could start off in first year in a B1 or a B2 class, but as they matured themselves and improved and their work improved, they could then be transferred internally from a B1 or a B2 class into a T1 or a T2 class. So there was an upward possibility for pupils back then.
Yeah, and also a downward possibility if you didn't keep maintain your standard.
Absolutely, absolutely. But you see, because of this equality and everything else that has come into our lives via politics, you just wouldn't get away with it.
Uh,
And I think parents are less able to accept that their son or daughter isn't really university material. Whereas, certainly when I was in school, no one expected to go to university, although that wasn't quite true in my school because there was a few teachers who saw potential in certain pupils and started and wanted to prepare them for university entrance examinations. And I happened to be one of them. And letters were sent out. There was about 6 of us in our class. Letters had been sent to the parents uh, saying that this is what the teachers in the school wanted to do. And how did the parents feel about it? Now, my mother right away said, well, we can't afford for you to go to university. And that just so happened for the rest of the lads that had been picked. But it tells me right away that even in those distant days of junior and secondary schools, that the good teachers could spot potential in kids and were willing and prepared to push them as far as they could.
there, there, there are a couple of grammar schools close to where I live that would regularly put pupils forward for the Oxbridge, and were doing so whenever I was at school 30 years ago.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
now, and also be advised that wasn't on a, you know, It wasn't right. We need to get people for the Oxbridge. It's if we've got 2 people in this year that we think are good enough, we'll get them pushed on into that. You got to be
Yeah,
doing 4, maybe 5 A levels,
yeah. Well,
and you're not getting those classes unless you're good enough.
yeah,
But by the end of fifth form, they had to be doing extra O levels, and they there are the grammar schools in and around the area I live are, well, basically across Belfast. The grammar schools are very results orientated, and it if you don't maintain your grades in uh, we're talking in old terms, so first, second, and third year, yeah, you're not staying at that school.
right.
And
Again, I would just remind you that when I was in school, in the era that I'm talking about, as a pupil, there were no examinations at all of any kind.
yeah,
Right. So when you left school at 15, as I did, you had nothing. You had a couple. I've got 2 certificates that I've still got, and a book that I've still got. But this was issued by the school, not the education department or the education authorities.
yeah, it
Nothing
wasn't it
for
wasn't
junior.
standardized.
No, there was nothing for junior secondary boys and girls. They just left school.
That's crazy. It seems like in the where you were, there was nothing. Uh, where I was, they had brought in a whole system of qualifications and whatnot, and from it wasn't long after I left school that the ordinary levels and CSE levels got merged into one, and they've dwindled the difficulty and therefore the quality of the qualification a way down. And if it keeps going the way it's going, it'll be back to where you are,
Yeah,
because even if you've got qualifications, they're not going to mean anything.
yeah. Let me add here though, and perhaps people don't know about this, and perhaps they've forgotten. But as I say, in 1961, when I left at the age of 15, no qualifications. About 2 years later, just like you're saying, they introduced the O grade at the same time. At the same time, they launched, in Scotland anyway, a massive evening class program where if you were out of school, you could go along, enroll for an evening class, and study for these new O grades. And I can assure you, 42, every school that was opened at night had queues round the blocks of young men and women queuing up to get into these evening classes. And they ran for years. And it was very simple, as you say, O grade English, 50% or more, you get a pass, you get a certificate. Less than that, you get nothing. It was a pass or fail situation. But then that gradually was changed to comprehensive. And then they introduced, in my opinion, a watered down version of O grades. They called it standard grade, where you could have a C pass, a D pass, an E pass. And I think there was even an F pass on that. But they're fails because you
Any
don't know 50% of the work.
anything below C is a fail.
Correct. But they would issue these certificates, as they still do.
I remember whenever I left school, uh, the local technical college was open at night, and it was something like £5 you enroll yourself for an O level course in English, maths, history, whatever, and you could go along and do that.
These were free of charge. Didn't
Oh,
cost anything. Didn't cost a halfpenny. You just went along, enrolled yourself, and turned up at 7 o'clock for whatever subject or subjects that you had enrolled in. You might not get that because it's subscribed, and a lot of the classes were oversubscribed, I might add.
Well, free education. You know, a lot of people are going to take up that offer.
Yeah, of course. And it's people who had come through the schooling system, faffing about and carrying on and not paying attention and all that. And then suddenly, after they'd left school, they'd wakened up and thought, shit, I've missed my chance. Here's my second chance. And off they went.
Haven't just realised how old you are, and not even that. It's the difference in how things were whenever you were that age and whenever I was that age, and it's an absolute light years away from what it is now for people at that age.
Oh,
and
for God's sake!
Having coached kids at football through the age of like 11 through to 16, and you would be talking about things and you could just see their eyes glazing over because they, you know, in between training, I would have talked about, you know, even I'd have said in between drills, I'd said something about the heart going on the horizontal or the vertical, and you know, just things like that. And you could see their eyes just glazing over, and there's no comprehension. And I'm thinking, you would not have done in my school. You know, it just seems to have got worse and worse. But what I wanted to ask you was, what was it like as a young man? How long after the war then were you at school, or were you in primary school during the war?
No. I'm not that old. I was born in 1946.
Right.
Right. So that makes me 75.
Yes.
And I went to school in the 1950s.
Right. And what was it like in you then being a teenager, late 50s, early 60s?
Well, I was a teenager in the early 60s, and
was it all it was cracked up to be?
Well, let me put it this way to you. I left school and I had a couple of key teachers that were crucial and changed my life enormously. I can get back to that if you want. But I had, and the other thing that was a great influence in my life was movies. My mother was a movie buff. I went to the movies from whenever I could sit in a knee and alone. And of course, my father was still alive at that point. So I grew up with a lot of movies in my life. And so I had seen films with Tommy Steele and Bill Haley and a very young Elvis Presley. So I wanted to be a pop star. And I had a guitar. My mother had somehow managed to get me a guitar. And I had a music teacher who was prepared to give lessons at the end of the school day, and that got me started. And so therefore, like a lot of boys, I started my own group. And my whole teenage life was involved in playing in the group, playing in the dance halls all over the place. And it was great to be in a pop group back then because the girls were all over you. But don't run away with the idea that there was lots of sex. There wasn't any sex. Not where I live, and certainly not where we ever played. But they wanted to, hang around and be seen with the guys in the group. And yeah, you could go outside with them and you could get a kiss and a cuddle and all of that stuff. But there was no sex, and there was certainly no drugs.
Yeah, more wholesome groupies.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. I mean, they did want to be seen with the guys in the group. Of course they did. So you could get them outside for a bit of a wench, as we used to call it, a snogging session.
Yeah.
That was
Uh,
no problem.
what
And that
what
was
type of
great, of course. It
what type of music did you play? Was it like was it more rock and roll or like
was all cover
more?
songs, what was in the top 20, put it that. Mainly that. But when we started, the guys at the top were Cliff Richard, Marty Wilde, the Shadows. And so we learned, to begin with, the things that we learned to play. Well, we had to learn to tune our guitars and learn to play them.
Oh, oh, Billy Fury and Ali Cochran.
Yeah, these guys, great artists. And so what we had to do is, and there was no instruction books on guitar playing. So we had to learn that in order to play together, we had to be in tune with one another. That was the first thing. But once you got past that, what we did was we would listen to a record over and over and over and try and figure out the chords that they were playing so that we could copy what they were doing. And that's how we learned to play the songs. And that's how we learned to play like Shadows, simply by repetition and learning from playing alongside the record.
Yeah, and it's not even like today where you could throw on a video of it
No,
and watch what the guitars what how the guitarist is playing it. You've got a bit of vinyl and that's your whole map. You've got
yeah,
to reconstruct it from there.
yeah. And when you would go to see Elvis Presley in those days, as a young man like that, if you look carefully, he's really not playing the guitar. He knows a couple of chord shapes. And so you're watching really closely. What's he doing? What's he doing? And then you try it when you get home and discover that it doesn't make music. See, the big shock for me was, you got to remember, I wakened up one Christmas morning and there was a clear plastic bag with a guitar in it waiting for me. I opened it up, lifted it up, and hit it like I'd seen Elvis and Tommy Steele and these guys do. And it made this awful noise because what I didn't realize is it was out of tune and it was upside down. Because I'm not and of course, I just naturally picked it up. If you can see what I'm doing here, I naturally picked it up and started doing that when I should have been doing this, right? So it's upside down, but I don't know that, do I? And I don't know you've got to tune it.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
it,
this is it. This is how it was. And so I was lucky, and I was fortunate because my auntie, who is only about 14 or 15 months older than me, and that's another story, she, of course, was ahead of me. So she said, why don't you come to the centre? Now, the centre was a community centre on a Tuesday night because they always have a group on. So I went along, and again, this was magic for me. You get a proscenium arch stage, the curtains are closed, and then they open out. And as they're opening out, the group starts up, and these four lads step forward, three wearing the same outfits as the Shadows, the red suits, the front singer's wearing a blue suit like Cliff Richard, and the drummer on the behind. And this is mesmerizing. But now I can watch what these guys are doing. And then I can try and remember some of it. And then when I go home, I can try these chord shapes.
yeah.
Very hit this.
there there was a guy that I knocked about with when I was a teenager. There's a couple of ones that play guitars, but there was this one guy, he'd never really been taught as such, but you put an instrument in front of him, he'd get a tune out of it.
Right.
There's somebody, the one sort of rich kid that we knew, there was a piano in their house,
Oh gosh.
right? And Wilkie had the only time he'd ever seen a piano was in school whenever the teacher's playing it, you know, and everybody's got to sing, right? And he was saying to the kid that lived there, "Can you play that?" He's like, "Yeah, I had lessons, but it doesn't really work very well." Well, he goes over and he's at the keys and he's dum 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 dum. See, in about 5 minutes, you had 3 people in unison getting a tune out of this thing by saying, "Right, you're on this key, you're on this key, and see, whenever I go 1, you're hitting that, you're following them." And he was doing bum, 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 up here. Nah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on in what's meant for you. But
Yeah.
I don't know, music
the-
teacher, big start.
The same guy had him and his brother were to put on like a show for the BB for the display.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Right, I'm going to play a lead." Said to his brother, "You're going to play the bass." And they were practicing.
Yeah.
And halfway through, they committed. They were going to put this show on. Right, it was going to be part of the annual display, and they were going to be doing it. And his brother couldn't get the bass at all. Well, he goes, "See that cable between your guitar and the amplifier? Unplug it." and he was playing the lead and hitting the bass a bit harder at the same time to actually get the full tune. And his brother was standing there strumming.
Well, oddly enough, we had that situation when we were out playing. We were out playing as soon as we could get something like cover an hour of instrumentals and songs. I got us booked out, but it was so much simpler back then, 42, because back then every single church in the town had a youth club, and every single church was running a little dance from the record player. And so when guys like myself came along, you could just get a job like that. You just went up. If you knew what night the youth club was on, and you would speak to the minister or the priest, whoever was organising it, tell them you've got a group. Would you like us to come and play at the dance? Yes. How much will that cost? £5 or whatever it would be. And you'd go along. You had a gig.
Yeah, those guys out. I was talking. He was part of a wee band, and they actually went to our local British Legion Hall and found out how much it was going to cost them to book the gig, and then sold the tickets and made money on it. You know, because this was something that outside of most of my peer group, well, these people that we know were going to be playing on a stage, and this was fucking, especially very working class East Belfast. This doesn't happen. This is totally new. So a load of people all went along, bought the tickets, and they put on the gig. It was actually very good. But you know,
well, it's the same in these church halls. They were always mobbed, and you would be playing to at least 100 boys, well, young men and women.
Yeah.
And that was a treat for them, because they were just like us. They were going to the same movies that we were going to.
Yeah,
and they heard the same records that we were hearing. But now they've got their own very uh, own version of these, Cliff Richard and the Shadows, and that's what made all the difference. We were playing live to them with 5-watt amplifiers, if you can believe such a thing.
yeah, and it's also an excellent way to learn your trade as a musician.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we ended up. We had a repertoire of about 200 um, songs and instrumentals between them that we could play, and well, most of the big gigs, once you moved up from church halls, you were playing, 3 hours at a time with a short break in between, and
So,
you needed a big repertoire.
yeah, so like local clubs and pubs.
Well, yeah, look, no, well, actually, local dance halls. We had
Yep.
three major dance halls in the town at one point.
Yes, that's right. We still had dance halls back then.
Yeah, and if you were playing the Palladium, the local Palladium dance hall, you'd be playing to a crowd of maybe 350 or so young men and women. If you went down to Cragburn, which was in Gourock, and it's a town that there's no separation between them. It had a beautiful uh, dance hall. It had a balanced floor and everything. So when you're dancing on it, you could feel the floor balance with you. Had a full proscenium march stage, and they played most of the time. They had it was a Charlie Harkins and the Kit Kat band. So it was a traditional cut down band like Glenn Miller, and then we would come on and play an hour, and that was for the benefit of the teenagers. So what we used to do is if we got a gig in the local Palladium, we could take a gig in the Cragburn as well on the same night, because what we used to do is move all the equipment, stay in our stage uniforms, drive down to Gourock, which is not that far away, set up and play there for an hour, and then come back up and play in the Palladium again for the rest of the night till say 1 o'clock. So we could make a bit more money by doing 2 gigs in the one night.
That that is excellent.
Yeah,
That's uh, most of the Orange Hall close to one of the Orange Halls, because there's a couple close to where I live. Uh, they have their upstairs has a balanced floor and a stage, and there was a tea dance there on a Saturday and things like that.
yeah,
Used to be uh, from the 50s through to the late 60s. That was where the Orange Halls were where people went to meet each other,
yeah.
and they had the dances. And there are many a Catholic couple that met each other at a dance at an Orange Hall,
I can believe that.
because
Why
uh,
not?
in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the while the Orange Order was still right, the Orange Order is a Protestant organisation. There's no other way to cut that. But whenever they ran their dances in the evenings and whatnot, that was, anybody could go to that, and there was no trouble or problems.
Sure. We had a slightly different situation here, and it's something you may or may not know about 42, is the American Navy came to stay in Dunoon for the Holy Loch and the submarines. And so we had a lot of American sailors in the town. And one of them, uh, I don't know if he was he must have been an officer at some point. He bought the local dance hall of the Palladium, as it was called back then, and he thought he could put the other dance halls out of business. So what he did was, instead of having just the one stage, which it normally had, he had other stages built into this place. And he hired enough groups to put on the stages, thinking that he could monopolize it and put everyone else out of business. And that failed, of course. But what I was going to tell you was Burton's, the tailor people, the tailor shops.
Yes, I remember them well.
Right. Well, when they had their premises, they owned the whole block. They always did that. They bought the entire block. Bottom ground floor would be the shop itself. In our town, the floor above it was a storeroom, and the floor above that was a dance hall. And it was just known as Burton's. Well, the American sailors decided that this was going to be their home. And I can assure you, on a Friday and a Saturday night, the street outside was like a battle zone between the local guys and the American sailors. And you would have the American MPs running around the town in their jeeps with their guns, trying to sort out all the problems. Because they were coming ashore with big wads of money.
Yes.
And that was not sitting too well with the lads, because now we're all competing for the same women.
Yes, that's a very major problem whenever all of a sudden you and the other thing, a town, a city has its own like level of economy,
Yes,
and you're important not just young fit men with a different uniform and a different accent. They also have more spending power.
absolutely. Absolutely apply to them. Plus, it was the very first time in my own life that I saw a black man in reality. I'd never seen a black man before except in the movies, but now they were all over the place.
Well, whenever I was a kid, the only time I encountered any black people in the war, few and far between, was whenever they were over with the British Army.
Mm,
That was it.
yeah,
And they were, and the the squatties that were over in Belfast then, cause like we're now going into the 70s, mid 70s, and things were really not good. And apart from the shell shock that most of those soldiers had on their face, uh, you had the black soldiers that were like, why am I the only black person here? There's nobody here, and there doesn't seem to be anybody black that lives here in this city, in this country.
yeah,
They have a double whammy. Like,
yeah. Oh, it'd be the same for the black American sailors. This is exactly the same. But what I was going on to tell you was this dance hall, Burton's. We played it a couple of times, and then the man who run it, Mr. Robinson, said, I want you to play Monday to Saturday next week. We said, yeah. So we played Monday to Saturday, and then on the Saturday night, he said, how would you like to just play here all the time? And so we played there for about 7 or 8 months in a row, which was great for us because we didn't have to do anything. We just left the equipment set up. We left our stage clothes there. So we just turned up, put the gear on, turned the amps on, and started to play. And that really made us a group, playing like that.
yeah, because it's like having a residency.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what was good for us was in the first part of the evening, which would be 7:30, they would get around 12 to 14 couples come in, and they were ballroom dancers. They would come in, the guys would change into their shoes and all that. And this man who ran this, he would powder the floor and all that for them. So we would just play the Shadows instrumentals for the first hour, which was, really easy for us, and that satisfied these people who came for the dancing. After about an hour or so, they packed up and left, and then in came everyone else, So we just switched on to the other part of our repertoire. But it was good for us as a group, and we made not a great deal of money, but we made steady money. The best
Yeah.
money we made was playing the American bass.
Yep. Because you get tips and stuff there.
Well, for a start, they paid big money. It doesn't seem like much now, of course, but it was big money for us. They would pay £30 a night, so you would do a Friday and a Saturday night, so that's £60 for the weekend. And the other thing was as much drink and as much as you could eat while you were there. And that was the first time I'd ever seen the consumption of American people, the amount of alcohol that was wasted, the amount of food that was somehow consumed and wasted was unbelievable to us. We'd never seen anything like this, And the other thing is, when you crossed the barrier, you left the noon and you were in America. It was Main Street. And they were driving on the other side of the road, and it was just like being in the States. It was quite amazing.
Yeah, everywhere they get a base, they turn it into America.
That's correct. Yeah.
I'll tell you. See, on a Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin.
Yeah.
Right. That was the base. There was a number of checkpoints in Berlin. The one that the Americans handled was it because the Americans had a sector, the British had a sector, the French had a sector, and the East Germans had the rest of it.
Yeah.
Whenever they divided that city, the East Germans went, we'll have half and you can do whatever you want with the other half. So that was split into 3 sectors.
Yeah.
Checkpoint Charlie was where the Americans met. See, 3 yards past Checkpoint Charlie,
yeah.
There's a McDonald's. It's like you go through this checkpoint, you're in America, here's your McDonald's.
Yeah, it's very much like that. They're like that wherever they go, but they cause nothing but problems. I can assure you, the fights that went on, it was unbelievable. But here's the thing: we didn't appreciate this, but later in life, when I was in my 20s and 30s, and I would be speaking to people who weren't from the town, they'd never heard of any of this. This had all been suppressed. It was never allowed to go into the newspapers, even back then. Now think about that.
Yeah, because there are friends and there couldn't possibly be any bother, and we don't want any. And the other thing is, if that gets out about there, what happens whenever the Americans want to put up a base somewhere else in Great Britain?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like it or not, in round an American army base, you have record shops that are selling records. You have electronic shops that are selling them radios, stereos, all that stuff that they want and they've got the money for. And the people running the town want that commerce.
Yeah.
And they're willing to put up with a lot of inconvenience for it.
Yeah. That's certainly true. It's certainly true.
Whenever Trump was talking about bringing the Americans out of Germany.
Yeah.
Germany's complaint was, what about all the shops around the American bases?
I can't believe that.
You know, that was genuinely, honestly, their
Concern.
complaint.
Yeah.
In round, I can't remember the name of the big NATO base in Germany. I can't remember. It's an acronym anyway. But like the shopping malls that sit around the outside of that is out of this world. It's just like a really big army base, and it's like they've just plumped all these big shopping malls out around it because they know they've got the money coming in. But it's not even just from the Americans, because you've got a load of British soldiers there that are all on an enhanced pay for being posted overseas.
Sure.
You've got French that are on enhanced pay for being posted out of the country, and it drives its own economy.
Yeah, of course. And what it did here across the River Clyde at Dunoon, is it started a boom in house prices.
Yeah, because
they started then going long term with local girls and actually getting married to them and looking for tenement flats to buy up. And that created a house bubble very early on. And I might add, a lot of these American sailors who married locals left without warning and left the wives and children behind.
Yeah, well, if you're in a submarine, boss, well, do you mean left as in on deployment, or just up sticks and disappeared back to America?
Oh, they just disappeared back to the States. And then when the wives went looking for them, the US military wouldn't help them find the husbands.
Yeah.
And that caused a lot of problems.
No. Well, here's the other thing. The American Army traditionally have been very good at finding soldiers and extracting money off them for American wives.
Right.
There has it has always been really simple for American women to get money off their service personnel husbands, because going back even then, all they had to do was contact the army. The army would file the army number. The army would find out where they were.
Yeah.
And the commanding officer would go, right, you owe this amount child support, and that would be deducted at source.
Yeah. Yeah.
That must be something to do with the fact that these were British women, that the American Army didn't see that as a priority.
Well, let me make a small correction. It was the American Navy.
All right, Navy.
Yeah. And I don't know why this happened. I just know that it happened. But then a few years passed, and I was working in one of the yards, and we were working on the floating dry dock that they used. And I got talking to one or two of the officers, and they told me quite bluntly that what you have to remember is that the American Navy, it's the trash of American society that's in the American Navy. That's what they said.
Yeah. I can imagine that as well.
And if that were true, then it kind of explains the irresponsibility of them just walking away like that. Admittedly, not all the girls had children at that point, but some of them did. Enough of them did to create a bit of a problem.
Yeah. See, the 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 Navy and to a certain extent the Air Force were seen as the safe, soft part of the American military.
Right.
Uh, Obviously, you're, with the exception of the United States Marines, which are part of the Navy, but you've,
I don't
as
think it
much
was
as,
any easier, to be honest with
no,
you, for too.
yeah, no, as as much as the Navy, the Marines are part of the Navy, they're not. They're totally segregated. They're on the. It says U.S. Navy on their paycheck, and that's about it.
Right.
But uh, you know, if you think about the people that are going to be in harm's way out of that army, are generally going to be your infantry soldier.
Yeah. Sure.
Their navy's big enough that people aren't going to attack it.
Right. Right. As I say, I can only tell you what happened in this time. And many years later, and many years that would be, I remember hearing an announcement where Australia were going to allow the Yanks to build this super naval base on their coast somewhere. And I thought, the people who live there have no idea what they're in for. I really felt sorry for them.
Yeah, but was part of you not going, your turn?
So that was my teenage life for you. And I
No,
thought,
that sounds actually very interesting and really enjoyable.
oh, it was. I mean, we got to meet a lot of the big names, of course, eventually. When the Kinks came up on their first tour, we supported them. That was a big thrill for us, of course. They
That,
were
that's a
something.
big crowd to play in front of as well.
Oh, gosh, yeah, absolutely. And we were just a warm up act, of course, but
Yeah.
that's not the point. The point where we were on the same bill and, how's it going, guys, and that sort of thing.
Did
Uh,
you keep annual posters?
no, didn't even see any of them.
Yeah.
I don't even know if there were posters, to be honest, because you got to remember back then, the UK wasn't set up for groups to go on tour. A lot of the times it would be the cinema would roll up the screen and they would use a cinema because
Yeah.
there weren't concert halls or anything like that. This was all new.
Yeah. That's right. I've seen film
Yeah,
of concerts, and I was thinking those seats look well comfy.
yeah,
Now it makes sense. They were in a cinema.
yeah. And if you've ever seen movies about the life of Buddy Holly, for example, that's what you'll
Yep.
see. That's what they're playing in. They're playing in cinemas, and the screens are rolled up, and it's only there for the night, and then they move on because they're moving around. And it was the same over here. So they would
Oh,
take venues wherever they could get them. Because even the touring side of things, even at that level for groups like the Kinks and the Beatles, well, before the Beatles hit big time, they were doing exactly the same thing.
yeah. The Beatles spent a lot of their early career touring around Germany.
Yes, of course. And again, where are they playing? Well, they're playing in Dockland,
Yeah.
and they're playing about 10 hours at a time, the same songs over and over and over again. Because they, like everyone else, have got a limited repertoire. And that's part of the reason why they start to write their songs, to extend their repertoire.
Yeah. You need new stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But the likes of us, we were moving around in different venues. So we would be playing We could go down to Dunoon, Queen's Hall in Dunoon, and play over there. Big money again, a beautiful, beautiful hall. Again, full stage, proper full dressing rooms underneath, etc., etc. Beautiful hall, still exists. Or we could be down in Rossi, playing in a La Caverna, which was nothing more than a large room. It was great. So you'd be standing like this with a guitar, and everyone's right up. You know, you're on a platform, you're not on a stage, you know, like this. Sweat's beating off everyone, you know. No alcohol.
Were you doing day jobs and
Oh,
then gigging at night?
yeah, of course. But I never, you see, this was the problem for me. It became the problem for me. I always thought confident that I was going to be, we would hit the big time.
Yeah, 'cause
So,
you're every night you're potentially that one gig away from there's an R&D person that somebody's going to pick you up, put you on a label.
well, it did happen actually. So, as far as day jobs are concerned, I was in and out of day jobs all the time because half the time I was too tired to go and say, yeah, so that I'm not going in today. Well, that would mean you would be fired. That's okay because there's a job around the corner. And so
Yeah,
I never had any uh, direction as far as holding
well,
down what was concerned.
well, you did have a direction, but it was all aimed towards keeping the gigs going.
Correct. And getting up into the next level. And one night we were playing the Queen's Hall over in Dunoon. Came a break and we were all in the dressing room. And the man that was acting as our manager at the time came in and threw on the bench 5 contracts to go professional because there was one of these guys out front that night. But the thing you have to remember is this is in the days when they bought an act. So what he wanted was what he had seen on the stage. He didn't want us to replace anybody. He wanted that. And 4 of us were prepared to do it, and 1 wasn't. And
Right.
so our chance came and went, if indeed it was a chance.
Yeah, so on the basis that he was like, yeah, no, it's all in or everybody or nobody.
Yeah, well, that's the way it was back then. You know, it wouldn't happen today. They would just say, yeah, okay, he can go. We'll get another lead guitarist then, no problem. But back then, when they saw the act or the group on the stage, and they liked what they heard, they thought maybe there was potential there. That's what they wanted. They wanted to buy that because it was complete as far as they were concerned. All these lads need is a song and the opportunity to sell it.
Yeah, I get get on a songwriter, buy a
Yeah,
song, uh,
yeah,
buy the rights to the song, uh, get it put on a record, get it pushed in the radio stations,
yeah.
and job done.
Yeah, and we go out and play the damn thing and
Yeah,
plug it. Yeah.
yeah. And because they've got the connections, we'll get you booked in the bigger halls, and it'll work.
Well,
But
it would have been a step up. Put it that way.
yes, it would have been another step along the direction. But then the other thing is, he's probably also looking at 5 other complete groups that he can pick any one of that is complete, and he's not going to be changing anything. So
That's right.
why bother?
Why bother? And this one guy said no, he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. He was. There's 5 of us, and there was 3 apprentices. I wasn't one of them, of course. I was in for the big time. We had the drummer was an apprentice joiner, and the singer at that time was an apprentice engineer, and the lad who wouldn't sign was in the newspaper business.
Yeah, I suppose an apprenticeship would be a big thing to give up to.
Absolutely. Well, these lads were willing to give it up, to try, to have a shot, except him. And I say, well, our chance came and went, if indeed it were a chance. Who knows? It wasn't meant to be. And the group didn't last long after that. I gave up after that.
Yeah, that would do a lot to pull the heart out of it, because that's also making a statement of this is our level. We're not going any higher than this.
That's correct. That's correct. And we had played the big halls in Glasgow at that point as well. And we had done these support acts. We had supported Sounds Incorporated. I don't know if you know them.
No, I don't know them.
A few hit records back in the day. They were an instrumental group, by the way. And the Kinks and a few others. And that was it. The Pretty Things, you might have heard of them. Like a rival to the Rolling Stones. The Who, they all came. The Searchers. There was a few groups that we played support to. But as I say, it wasn't meant to be. My life, my destiny was down another road, and that was that.
So whenever that group split up, did you then go look for a full-time job?
Yes and no. I needed a job, and I needed a job that didn't involve pick and shovel and carrying hoods.
Oh, they're not good. I had one of them.
I had a
Uh,
few,
yeah, I
and I worked with docs as well.
yeah. Whenever I was like 18, I was going up a ladder with a hut of bricks that was designed for 12 bricks with 18 in them, and then walking across a set of joists at the top, and not good.
No,
Really not good.
you should try
Uh,
that when you're on the apex of the roof when you're doing a repair. You're repairing the chimneys.
oh, yeah, no, really not good. Uh,
I worked with Slaters
yeah,
at one point. So I needed a job that wasn't involved in that. And the only job I could get that didn't involve any of that was shop work. So I went and started working gents' tailors. At least I could go dressed to work. And there was no heavy lifting involved.
well, I will say that you're a very stylish man.
Oh, thank you.
You know, you working with clothes and whatnot would definitely suit you, because you are you have that air about you, and you're well dressed and presented.
Well, thank you very much. That's part of the stage life, you see. I went on to have a solo career after that. Uh, but I learned a lot from this man who was our manager, because he himself had tread the boards as part of a duo comedian act, and he tried to drill into all of us. There's a certain way you present yourself in front of the public, whether it's a pop group or not. And I always listened to what he said. And so when I went on my own, it was the same approach. You don't go on drunk unless it's part of your act. You don't go on and curse and swear. And that wasn't part of my act. I was selling myself as a singer-songwriter. So I would just speak to the audience the way we're speaking, introduce the song a little bit, and then play the song. And I did that for a good number of years until I got to the top, as far as I could go in the folk scene. And then I quit while I was number one, in the sense that when I get invited to play a gig, I would be at the top of the bill.
Yeah, the support acts would come on. They would get small slots earlier on in the evening, and then you would be the main event.
Yeah. And once I got to that point and realized there was nowhere else to go because I had applied myself and now it was just me. Um, I was told over and over again by various agents, come back and see me when you can fill the Apollo Theatre in Glasgow. In other words, when you got to the point where you can command an audience of, say, 500 in the Apollo, uh, we'll be interested because you've done all the hard work.
Yeah,
And
but
I
we're not willing to do anything at all to help you get
get
there.
there. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Get getting 500 people off their ass to go and that's
It's a hard job.
not. It's a very hard job.
Yeah. I went to see Ralph McTell in the Apollo, the same Apollo Theatre, and there was nowhere near 200 in the hall that night. And that was Ralph McTell, a very well known figure in the folk scene, with a hit record behind him.
Uh, I I know it's different, and the audience size is different. But I did some stand up poetry. Right now, there was a girl that ran an open mic night who is very well known in Northern Ireland poetry scene. Right? Uh, has her own one person show and is going off the Edinburgh Fringe. Whenever she ran her open mic night, if you took out the people who came to perform,
Yeah,
and also some of them would have brought one person with them, right?
absolutely.
Right. Whenever you took all of those people out of it, I think you had possibly two paying customers.
I can
And
believe.
right, yes, and this woman has an audience. That this is not to belittle what she's on. This woman is very well known, has an audience. It's just that's how hard it is to get people off their ass to come see a show.
Absolutely, my friend. I say to my audience now on YouTube, and I didn't come on YouTube for this reason. When I play one of my songs on the channel, most of the time I'm playing the people who are listening to the song. It's a bigger audience than most of the nights that I played in a folk club.
Yep, that that I can see that being true. Also, I really like your intro song and your outro song
Oh,
for
thanks.
two very different reasons.
Okay.
Uh, the the everlasting flow
Yeah, it's
is
actually called the Eternal Flow, but
oh
let's
the
go.
eternal flow. Right, yeah, sorry, heads away with that's all very beautiful,
Thank you.
and the words are there. There's a meaning to it. Uh, it tells a story. The pictures you put to it all are very fitting, and it's really nice.
Thank you.
Uh, the one you use is your intro that you had wrote as a national anthem
Yeah,
speaks a lot of the people of Scotland. It's uh, it's patriotic in the right way,
thank you.
and it's not about the the hills or the valleys or the highlands or the lowlands or whatever. It's about the people
Yes, yes.
and their sense of belonging. A really, really good song.
Thank you. And you know, you probably heard me say it was a challenge that was given to me.
Yeah, as a better version of the national anthem than the one you're currently using.
Correct. And I said the trouble is that national anthem is a song about a battle where we beat the English, and that shouldn't be a national anthem. National anthem should be a celebration of the people.
I, I've got all sorts of issues about how that became a national anthem.
Well, so have
And and bear in mind, I'm not Scottish, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably not my place to poke my nose into it. But
You're going to anyway.
no, I'm doing my best. I'm holding myself back. But it
Don't
seems
hold yourself back on my account, 42.
no, it seems to me that it was installed as a national anthem without a proper process by a pressure group.
Yes, it was. It came from the rugby crowd in Edinburgh. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
Because the two folk singers who, well, one that penned it and promoted it over the years, it used to get played at rugby matches a lot. And at the time, Alex Salmond was a big rugby fan.
Hold on. Right. Is that right? Flower Scotland, is that a relatively recent song?
Yes. Yeah, well, it was probably written back in the late 60s, early 70s, because they used to appear on BBC, who would have a show called the White Heather Club.
Yes, with Andy.
Ah,
We used to watch that on at Hogmanay.
yeah, well, they would appear on it occasionally, and that's usually the song that they would sing, Flower of Scotland. And there's so I don't know the ins and outs, but there must have been some actual connection between them and the SNP party at the time. That's all I can say. I don't know the ins and outs of it, except what I've already said. And it was the other lad. There was two of them. One had white hair, long, and it was the other lad who actually penned the thing.
Right. No,
But it had nothing to do with the public. It was just it became the national anthem.
yeah.
Scotland the Brave was dumped. I always thought it was a bit of a dirge myself, but never mind.
Well, Scotland the Brave became the national anthem for the Commonwealth Games.
Right.
So,
That was around for a long time.
yep. This is my understanding. My understanding is England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland all had the same national anthem, right?
Right.
Which was fine until it came Commonwealth Games time. And in order to separate an English, Irish, Northern Irish, Scottish, or Welsh, actually, it would have been Irish back in the day, gold medal. The English played I know the song, in England's greatest fields.
Is that Jerusalem?
Jerusalem, yes. The English played Jerusalem. For the Welsh, they played that Welsh tune, whatever it is. For Scotland, they played Scotland the Brave. And for Northern Ireland, they played the Londonderry.
Right.
Right, okay, which is more commonly known as Danny Boy.
Ah, yes.
Right, because the person that wrote Danny Boy took the tune and put words to it.
Correct.
Right, okay. And that was solely so as they could distinguish between
who was in the podium.
Yes, for the Commonwealth Games.
Right.
And there was a push by Scottish people and push by Welsh people to turn that into their official national anthem.
Right. Well, that's something I didn't know.
Right. And then what a similar group of people a long time later have done has ousted Scotland the Brave and put in Flower Scotland.
Yeah. And my argument about it always was it was about a battle, we would beat the crap out of the English, which is not the right sentiment for a national anthem. It's a good enough folk song. But the other problem with it is it's got a tricky little piece of timing in it. And when there's a large number of people singing it, it goes out of sync, and you end up with one group singing slightly in front or behind the other group because of this tiny little tricky piece of timing. It's to get the lyrics in.
Yeah, particularly in a stadium,
Yes, that's what I'm talking
because
about.
uh, in a stadium it's hard enough because uh, going to a lot of football matches, the whole stadium singing the same song. There's a disjoint between one end and the other
Right.
because it takes time for noise to travel, and it takes
Yeah.
a couple of repetitions to get everything all in the sync.
Yeah.
Uh, it's very rare that you get a full stadium singing.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Uh,
start at the same time and finish at the same time.
yeah, but it's even at that, there in most football grounds, you'll find that you've got a singing section and a non-singing section,
Right.
right? Um, Actually, you'll have two sides and one behind the goal that's a non-singing section, and only sings very rarely whenever there's just been a goal scored or something. And you've got one area that sings all the time.
Right.
So it doesn't become as disjointed most of the time as it does whenever the whole stadium's singing.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
Being blessed with and cursed in watching Northern Ireland play, we have, our our song is "We're not Brazil, we're Northern Ireland." We we have our fans are much better than our team, right?
Right.
And we'll love them all the same, but you have quite a lot of times in Northern Ireland match where the whole stadium is singing together, but
Right.
they're not because there's a bit of a jig about halfway through it, and then it sort of gets into sync, and then the volume just intensifies again. But if you're doing that with these are all for simple chants.
Yeah.
Now, whenever you get into something that has a tricky bit of music in it, where you've got to squeeze lyrics in, and people have got to make a decision on exactly how that goes, that's going to make it even worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and echoes, as Mandarin Skywalker has just said. By the way, I just want to say quickly to the chat, I have been watching, but I haven't been putting up comments and stuff because we've been having a good conversation and I didn't want to make it disjointed. So thanks to everybody in the chat anyway. But that's why I haven't been putting up comments as much as I normally would.
Well, you see, you have the advantage on me. I've never been to a football game, so I wouldn't know these things. I've seen football games on television years ago when we had television in the house. Uh, but this was my two objections to that song. So when my pal, the good doctor, said, "Well, if you think you could do better, on you go," and I wrote the song that you're now talking about.
Yeah, it does. It fully fills that brief.
Well,
It's the first time I heard it, I was
yeah,
like, "That's good," and then the second time, because it sort of I listen to the words better because it's like
yeah,
that with songs and stuff, you and I had man, that's a really good song. And it makes perfect sense whenever you tell me it was written as a possible national anthem because it really works for that.
yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It does really do mean a lot when people say things because uh, I've been at music all my life, as you now know, or
Yeah.
realize. Um, and so it means a lot to me.
Oh, the other thing is, full disclosure, when I started writing poetry, uh, one of the things I did was was on a page where people comment and everything. And after about maybe a year and a half, whenever I'd actually got to a level where my poems were a bit more polished and they were coming out good, one of the things I stopped doing was making any comments about any poetry that I didn't think was good,
Right.
because I didn't want to tell anybody any lies, and I didn't want to slate anything. So I developed a policy of, if it's not good, I'm saying nothing about it whatsoever.
Yeah. Don't
You
comment.
know,
Don't
you
comment.
know. So I mean, it's not. I'm not saying that just to be nice. I genuinely do think that about those songs.
Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. I do, especially with the chat, say things like that. I do. It means a lot to me. It really does, and that's not just words. It really does mean something, because I put all my enormous chunks of my life into music, always hoping that one day, the music would take hold and be known to a much larger audience. And until I started the channel, that had never happened. So YouTube has opened up an audience much bigger than I'd ever hoped would be possible for me. And although
Yeah.
it's still limited, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't run away with the idea that a couple of 100,000 or 1,000 people know my work, but the audience I have seem to enjoy the music that I play them. And that means a lot.
Well, the other thing is, the internet's forever.
Yes, yes.
Uh, it's not going to be going away unless YouTube take a bit of squeal on nerves and decide, yeah, you can't do this anymore. But and it would surprise you how many views and stuff you'll accumulate just for it being there over a period of time.
Yeah. And the other thing that's happened, and again, it came as a lovely surprise, is people from the chat would ask for copies. Can I download this or that, the other? And of course, yeah, of course you can. And that, again, means a lot.
Uh,
Because you know how much work you put into your poetry. And I know how much work that I've put into my music and songs. So when somebody enjoys it that much, it does mean a lot. It means that you didn't bloody waste your time.
yes, there's a hell of a lot of that. You put something out and you're waiting for comments and you're hoping that they're going to be charitable at the very least, and
Yeah,
then whenever you get people that have actually, oh, they've seen this thing, they've actually come back for more.
yeah, yeah.
That there's a lot in that.
One of the things that, let me just show you. It's got one here, as it so happens. This is how far I would take it. Right.
Right. Oh, is this your CD?
This is a CD of mine, right?
Right. Yep.
This is how far I would go with this thing, with all of them, right?
Uh-huh.
It's as near as you can get to something you would buy in a shop. And I would send this stuff out to people. And I would get silence. They wouldn't even say, oh, by the way, I got your CD.
Are these like industry people?
Oh, no.
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 Oh, all right.
Friend.
Fuck. Yeah.
So
That
you're left with, what does that mean?
I tell you what it means. It means you're getting no more.
I did stop it eventually, but you're left with this as though you just stepped off a cliff and you're waiting on something to happen and it doesn't happen. Not even, oh, see that CD you sent me? Yeah. Oh, it was crap.
Yep.
get that?
That would even be useful.
Yeah, exactly.
Not even just it's crap. Here's what it is. See the order that the songs are in. Uh that that's not really flowing for me. It would have been better had it been, in this order
Yeah,
or what. Because the other thing is,
you could go away and change it.
yeah, you know, uh, this wonderful thing happened with the internet because you probably remember doing something similar where you would sit with your tape recorder, your radio cassette recorder, whenever the chart show was on, and you'd be hitting record and trying to get it where the person wasn't talking and
Yeah,
get the whole song in, and then you would have two tapes and you're trying to get them into one semblance of an order and the like. But now with computers you can do things. You can uh, just create your own playlist and have your own album. I've done that quite a few times, and you sit and you ponder. And then for me, I like this song after this, and the the pace of the album that you've created, it speeds up, it slows down, and
yeah.
that sort of
Sure.
thing. But if they were giving you feedback like that, saying, yeah, well, or even, yeah, it's just not the type of music I like, that would be one thing. But to just say
I
nothing
think,
whatsoever.
yeah, it leaves you nowhere. It leaves you just with this huge question mark. Yeah. So I stopped that.
Yeah. Well, I definitely wouldn't be sending any more to anybody that hadn't given me any feedback.
And that's why when I started the channel, I decided that Friday night would be not a night for politics. It would be a night for promotion of artists of all kind. That was my ambition,
Yeah.
and to have writers, poets, singer-songwriters, and all manner of artists, uh, simply to get the audience away from politics for at least one night.
Yeah. Like an open mic night for YouTube.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it worked fine up until a certain point, and then it all fell apart.
Did
Now I I struggle. I don't get people to come on. I've never had people on since,
well,
and I've appealed. I used to appeal all the time, during the streams. I would say, anybody out there, and go through it all and say, be in touch, send me an email, we'll get you on. You can promote your work. Da 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 da. Never got a reply, not one.
well, if you ever decide that you want a bit of poetry on, I'll come on to that. I'll do some of my stuff.
Well, I'll bear that in mind for to do,
Um,
because I've got a lot of people on my channel who like poetry. Because I
well,
sometimes, well, I can show you this while we're here. I made this. Oops.
yep.
Okay, it's a
Uh-huh.
3-volume set of various poems. Not all mine. I've got, I think, two of my poems on each disc, and sometimes I play one of the tracks to my audience, and they love poetry. There's a lot of poetry lovers on my channel, so we could do that. We could
And
easily do that.
the the guy at the start of the night, RPOW, which stands for a real piece of work, who was asking about your was saying he hadn't meaning was asking about the party and stuff. He
Yeah.
also, by the way, said your hat's fucking cool. He was impressed with that. He has one or two very good poems. Uh, I don't know whether or not. he's still writing. He I was talking to him quite a while ago, and he said that he had some sort of scribblings, and I directed him to the old poetry site that I'm on,
Yeah.
and he put a couple up that were very good, and then his next lot were quite jank, where he was sort of clearing through the coal to get to the diamond
Yeah.
again. But there's a possibility he could come on and do one.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. I would directly have you read the poem it's up on the channel?
To be honest with you, I haven't. Uh,
It's an
well,
inspired piece of work. It's called Righteous Man.
now, is it on in the form of video?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I'll need to go look for that.
Yeah, it's there on the channel. It's like the header, if you like.
Oh, right. Yes, I haven't watched that.
But well, that's the last piece of poetry that I've read.
Right.
But it's
I'll
inspired.
I'll have to go back and have a read of that. I'll have a listen to that.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear your views on it. But yes, I think that's something for us to organise for the future as a poetry night.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is there's quite a few people that watch your channel regularly that have definitely got a poem in them, good, bad, or indifferent. And we could possibly manipulate them into saying, right, we're going to do this. And we're not that worried whether you don't need to be polished. You can have it in front of you, you can read it. And we're going to give this a go and see how it goes. And then maybe think about doing it on a bi-monthly basis or something.
Yeah, I'm all for that. That would be a great thing if we could get that off there. I think you're right. There's a lot of talented people in the chat. I know that. I know that. Apart from Sense, I mean, there are many others, despite what
Yeah.
certain people say about them. But I think
Yeah. I think Sansom's got a poem in him.
oh, he's got more than a poem in him. He actually wrote a, a short story for me last year when I was doing my Halloween stream.
Mm-hmm.
He sent it to me and I read it aloud, live. But I'm sure we could get him to do a bit more than that for the next Halloween show.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think there's possibilities there.
it's food for thought anyway.
Yeah, because as I say, the Friday night, me being the age I am, you see, Friday night's a traditional beginning of the weekend, despite
Yes.
people working 12 bloody hours a day. So I
And
like to keep that as casual as possible.
you also come from a generation where chanters were a thing. If
Yeah,
that, yeah, I'm not 100% sure if that term translates from Belfast to where you are in Scotland, but a chanter would have been, uh,
a singer.
yeah,
Somebody,
yes, you. If you were having a bit of a sing song, you'd say, "Here, Joe, get you up and sing something. You're a good chanter."
yeah. Oh, no, I understand that term perfectly. Don't know if it's used today, of course, but it's certainly of my generation.
Yeah,
You
it,
chanter.
it probably. Here's the other thing: the the idea of a family get together and a family sing song.
Oh, gosh.
I think that's pretty much gone.
Yeah. We used to have them in the family. I remember when Helen and I, our wedding day, which we organised ourselves, the reception was in our house. And I said to her, right, we'll sing this song, which had become a bit of a personalised song. We'll sing our song. But the key here is you've got to get in before Auntie Phoebe sings. Nobody wants to follow Andy Famey. And Helen said to me, "Why is that?" I says, "Because my Auntie Phoebe has got the best voice outside an opera house I've ever heard. So you don't want to follow her. You've got to get in first."
Whereas everybody wanted to follow me because I am tone deaf.
Well, interestingly, with Auntie Phoebe song, and I'm not exaggerating, she had this incredible 3-octave range, beautiful, beautiful singer. Could have been an opera star, I think. Anyway, it was her husband that would follow her, because what he would do is he had this brilliant Al Jolson routine, and he would do all the actions to go with it. He was a chanter,
Hmm.
but nobody else would sing after Auntie Fanny. Oh gosh, no.
Roy Herbert's putting up to the chanter is an instrument inserted in the bagpipes.
Well, that's also true, of course.
Yeah, well, it's actually the half bagpipe that you start to learn on.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
I know that because as a young boy in the boys' brigade, I had to go at learning the bagpipes,
Is that right?
and yeah, I could get a noise out of the thing, but putting the right fingers over the right holes at the right time, just no, that did not work for me at all. Uh, I should have knew whenever I couldn't play the recorder that it wasn't going to work. The only musical instrument I can play at all is a stereo.
Well, my mother enrolled me in the Boy Scouts because she wanted me to be a drummer boy.
Ah,
She wanted me to learn to play the kettle drum.
right.
She enrolled me in the Boy Scouts, and I quite liked being in the Boy Scouts. Unfortunately, I had by that time I had my own pocket money. I was earning my own pocket money, and I used to take myself off to the cinema. And the cinema was just across the street from where we lived, so there was no danger, of course. This is a true story. And one night I went in blind. I didn't look at the posters. And I just said to the lady outside the hall, "What's on?" And she told me that it was just finishing up on the Bee movie. So I waited, and then I went in during the adverts. To cut a long story short, the main feature came on. The lights went down. The curtains gradually opened, and this blaring music started. And I sat there in the darkness and watched a film like I had never seen before. I'll tell you the title of this film. It was called The Pictorial History of the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich.
Oh,
And in this film, I saw images of boys that looked like me with uniforms on that looked like my uniform. And the booming voice was telling us these boys will soon be wearing black SS uniforms and be in charge of gas chambers and will execute millions upon millions of Jewish men, women, and children. And I walked out of that cinema that night, obviously emotionally traumatized, but not realizing it.
yeah, because
Saying to myself, I'm never going back to the Scouts. And I never went back because I don't want to be those boys.
what a horrible thing to do.
My
What?
mother never forgave me, never forgot it because she had bought all the uniform and she was a widow.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to National Socialism.
What age were you?
About 11.
Why did the woman let you in?
Because in those days there was no censorships.
Yeah, right. I understand there was no censorship, but why would an adult just let an 11-year-old walk in? Fuck, walk into that propaganda?
Because she probably never gave it a thought. It would be a thing. It wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
Because there was no certifications as such back then. It was certified for viewing. That's it.
yeah, uh-huh.
And
And
I'd seen hundreds of movies by then,
yeah,
but I'd
and
never seen anything like this. This was something very different.
yeah, and then the other thing is the powers that be wanted that out. They wanted as many people to see that as possible.
Correct. And as I've said before about this subject, it followed all the usual storylines that you see in all of these documentaries. Ended with the collapse of Berlin and Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun killing themselves, etc., etc. But it didn't stop there. It then circled back into the camps. So we had all these images of piles of naked, dead, emaciated bodies being bulldozed into these holes in the ground. But interestingly, and I'm not making this up either, I remember seeing one of these images and thinking, doesn't look right. And that was it. That was it. And then 20 odd years later, going through a book on the subject, I saw this image again. But now it was a still photograph. And I spotted what was wrong with the image. And what was wrong with the image was it was a British soldier that was driving the bulldozer. In other words, this is something that had been going on after the war had ended. It wasn't a German soldier or an SS man or anything like that. It was a cap that gave it away.
Yeah, you you gotta question what all happens in the chain to have a British soldier and a bulldozer with those bodies.
Well, obviously, they had come across them. They came across them at Dachau, where there was a large trade load of people, and the train had been decimated from the air by the Allied aircraft. And these were people that were being moved from parts of Germany that was being overrun by the Allies, and they were being moved further into Germany. But they were obviously people who were incredibly ill.
Yeah. Oh, they haven't had a nice life to get to that emaciated state.
No. And of course, through the what do you call it, ran through the camps.
Oh, they called it the Auschwitz flu.
Well, whatever it was, I can't remember what what it's actually called. And that had emaciated all these people.
Yeah.
Of course, everybody in Germany was starving, not just people in POW camps and whatnot.
What you find is whenever a country starts to run out of food, generally, if you're a foreign national prisoner, you're the last in the line for very little food.
Yeah.
You know,
Typhoid, that's what it was.
typhoid, yeah.
Ran through the camps. And that's what causes that immediate dehydration and emaciation. But as I say, that was the effect of that movie. I decided that night, and I was puzzled. There was another thing that puzzled me was, there were a couple of things that puzzled me, was I wasn't sure what the word Jew meant because I'd never heard it before. That was a puzzle. And I couldn't understand. Every time you saw Adolf Hitler, he was surrounded by all these guys. And I kept saying to myself, if he's so bad, why are these guys doing what he tells them? All they have to do, I mean, there's enough of them. You know, they've all got guns. Why don't they just arrest them or shoot them? This is a child's mind.
Yeah.
And the other thing I kept asking myself was, if he hated these people so much, what had they done to him to create this hate? And then I started to look for the answers.
Yeah, there's no easy answers in
There's
any of that
none.
stuff.
No, of course not. And that was a lifetime searching.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, 42, because of my generation, the only place you can get these answers possibly is by reading books.
Yep. And the other thing is, like it or not, the people who write the books have got an agenda.
Well, again, this is something you don't know when you're young.
Oh, yeah, totally. And you also don't know. You also don't know that there's the set of books that you're being given, and somewhere there's another set of books about the same events, and somewhere there's yet another set of books about the same events, and they all have different stories.
Correct.
And trying to find out which one is the actual accurate one is impossible, because they've all got bits in them that's true, they've all got bits in them that's lies, and it's all mixed together like some sort of stew.
Yeah.
And
if I ever find that book, I'll let you know. The one that's got all the truth in it. Because I haven't found it yet.
the one thing I remember similar to that is doing history in school and done background to Second World War, all about that. And a very strange thing occurred. Teacher said, whenever he says the rise of Hitler, and he says he formed the Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party.
Yeah.
And he says it didn't really mean anything. It was just a bunch of labels that he threw together and called it a party and moved on. And I remember as like a, I don't know what I'd been, 14, 15-year-old. I didn't know what was wrong with that statement, but I knew there was something wrong.
Yeah.
Even in my mind back then, it's like he has pushed through that incredibly quickly. And he's explaining everything else. And that wasn't, there's something not right here. That's not a large enough description.
Yeah.
And it was only, I'm going to say, 8 years ago that I found an answer to that. And it turns out that actually they were socialist.
Of course they were.
All of their policies were very socialist.
Yes, but not Marxist. But not Marxist.
Yeah, well, Marxist is international. Nazism is
national.
Yep, right. The other thing is, he was very interested in the workers because he wanted to give every worker a VW Beetle, and he wanted better improvements for the German working people.
Yeah.
So, and then it goes a step further, and I found out that the Nuremberg laws were a carbon copy of the Jim Crow laws.
Is that
Right?
right?
Yep.
I've never looked at the Crow laws.
Yeah. Well, they're pretty much the same as the Nuremberg laws.
Right, okay.
Right. They were looking for a way to legally discriminate against the Jews, right? Because believe it or not, everything that they did to all their minorities was perfectly legal in Germany.
Yeah.
Right, because they put in the laws that allowed
Correct.
them to do it. I'm not for 1 minute saying that made those laws good or right or fit and proper, but
God.
they were the laws. But they
Yeah.
were looking for ways to legally persecute the Jews.
Yeah.
And somebody went, have a look at them Jim Crow laws that the Democrats have got in, because if we just adapt a couple of words here and there,
We've got our law.
yes.
I didn't know that. I must be
Now,
honest.
well, here's the other thing. That's what I was told. And I was only whenever I'm telling you this back is I've never actually fully looked at the Nuremberg laws. And I've never actually fully looked at the Jim Crow laws. So I'm going to have to actually do that.
Well, likewise, I've never looked at it either. I would make another correction here is, well, Adolf Hitler didn't start that party. He joined it. It was already
Yeah.
formed.
Yeah. He joined it and took it over.
Eventually, he took it over because he became the main draw for crowds because he was the better speaker.
Yeah.
But he did start it. But there's a lot of rubbish spoken about all of that. But I think what you said earlier is absolutely correct. I've been reading these types of books since I was that age. And I haven't got to the bottom of it, and I don't even try anymore. I have closed the book on it, so to speak, in my mind and say it's something that happened. It shouldn't have happened. All those people should not have died. But we'll never get to the full truth of the matter because so much of it went on without any kind of records.
Yes. There is that. There's definitely a lot of shit that went on that nobody's got a record of anywhere.
Yeah.
And there's also been things that happened during that war with the British, with the Americans, with the French, with the Australians, with the Japanese, with the Italians, with that there is no record of. The whole thing is a what's that word? Clusterfuck. That's it.
That'll do. That'll do.
Yeah, it. And to try and get to the bottom of all of it. Well, here's the thing. If you take one day during that war,
Yeah.
the 6th of June,
Right.
there are casualty figures for British, American, Canadian, German troops along that beach or the 4 beaches.
Yeah.
Sword, Gold, Omaha, Juno. Every one of them are estimates.
Yes. That's
Everyone.
correct.
Now, I can tell you what I do know. Everybody has a record of exactly how many people they put on each boat, each aircraft that was going over.
Of course they did.
Right.
Or did or do. They still may have it.
Right. They have a record of who turned up the next day to be part of their unit.
Yeah, of course.
But yet, with all, we're still working on an estimate over 50 years later.
Yeah.
That tells you everything you know about how accurate all of that reporting is.
Yeah. Yeah. My father was involved in that, by the way.
Where was he?
Oh, he was in the Merchant Navy. He was transporting the American troops into the craft. He said there were a lot of well, according to what my mother said, I have no in-depth knowledge of my father. He spent too much time at hospital, but he told my mother apparently that the Americans were just lazy sods. They wouldn't even carry their own kit. They had to, the merchant seamen had to throw the kit in after them.
Whenever they were getting down in the landing crafts.
Yeah, apparently so. Don't know how true that is. It might have been some exaggeration involved.
There's another aspect to that. If you imagine you're in a ship going down a cargo net into into a landing craft. If you've got a 7-foot swell, right?
Yeah.
You could step off that. Rope to where you think you're dropping 6 inches to be dropping 7-8 foot. Now, doing that yourself is going to make it go out. Doing that with 60 pounds of kick in your back is going to break an ankle.
I never even thought of that. That's an excellent point.
And there is a possibility that there was a decision taken. We're going to put the men in, then we're going to throw the kid in after them.
Again,
but
I can't say. I can't comment. I'm just telling you an anecdote that I got from my mother. That's it.
What I do know is I have seen lots of video of soldiers going down cargo net with their kid on their back.
I've seen that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if I was going to be running up a beach with a knife on the end of my rifle, I would want to make bloody sure I had my own kit in my back, that I knew what was inside it.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, does that mean that it didn't happen? But it is a good story.
As I say, my mother would tell me these things growing up because, I say, my father spent so much of what remained of his life in hospitals. So I didn't really ever know. But that's the way it was meant to be. 42. That's the way it was meant to be.
It's just how it went. Right. Yeah. We're coming up on 2.5 hours.
Oh, for God's sake, it's 2 o'clock.
Yeah, it is. It's 2 o'clock. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Well, now you come to mention it. No, I'll let you wind up. It's a late night for the folks. I don't know how many you've got sitting there.
There's currently 16.
Oh.
And looking through the chat, they have been quite interested. Whenever I'm having a conversation, I try not to take too much. Well, start pulling up bits of the chat because it just derails the whole conversation.
Yeah, you know it's that when you were on my channel. I try to do the same.
But it has been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise. It's always nice to speak to you.
It is, and that was stuff it's all over. It's been a great stream, 42. I can't chat and listen either. It's it is what it is. And it was quite interesting. We went into a whole conversation that we haven't been anywhere near before.
Of course. That's always good.
Yep.
It is. So we'll do it again, I'm sure.
Yes, we will indeed.
And we must remember this poetry idea. I like that a lot.
Yeah. I think we could what's that word? Oh, used to do it in the Navy to get themselves a crew. Press gang. we could press gang. We could press gang a chat.
Oh, I'm sure I could talk to Sid some about that. I want
Yeah.
to do a live stream with him anyway, simply because of the music that he produces, despite certain individuals. I like his music. I think a lot of it, and I want to get him on.
Oh, that thing about Dangerfield's a bit of a wind up.
Is it?
Yes. Here's what's Dangerfield does a show. Well, whenever I say does a show once a year, this will be the second one he has coming up. He does a show called Scrub Stock, where people out of the chat send in one piece of music, and he collates them all together, and then we all listen to it together.
Right.
Right, like a festival, but
Okay.
he doesn't. He doesn't listen to any of the music as it comes in.
Right.
So on the night of the stream, actually last year's one went into 2 nights because there was that many people sent stuff in. He's listening to it for the first time along with everybody else,
Right.
and I think Sansom sent in about 5 files, and Dangerfield says, "Look, you're going to need to pick one because it's one per person."
Right.
And that's where Sansom's went. It's not good enough for Dangerfield.
Okay. It's sense of humor.
Yeah, I think
You know.
I'm pretty sure that's where that's coming from.
Right. They don't tell me anything. 42.
Don't just
Don't tell the old guy. He'll get confused. So anyway, no, I've had a great time. I've
Yeah.
really nothing more to say unless we launched into a whole new conversation, and it's a bit late in the night.
Yeah, it's a bit late for that now. I'm going to dig up my a tune for outro.
Okay.
Actually, tonight's outro is going to be our former national anthem, in memory of our sovereign, our former sovereign,
Okay.
which we haven't touched on tonight.
I was going to say that we never actually mentioned her death.
Yep, I am going to be doing a stream next week on. I'm going to be doing a stream next week on Elizabeth life and her contribution to the country.
Okay.
That's the way I'm sort of going with that. Say, as I said to you before the stream, everybody's going to have their own opinion on that, and which is right and fit and proper, and we don't all need to agree on that, but so it's the way it is. Personally, personally, I am quite saddened, but
I don't feel affected by it, to be honest.
It hit me quite. I was surprised at how affected I was by it on the day.
Yeah, I am concerned about who's taking over, of course.
Well,
but that's another story.
To be totally honest with you, I would have been very happy had it went straight to William.
Oh, likewise.
The one thing I will say is, because Charles is now king, he does not have the liberty of indulging in all his pet projects anymore. They're done. They're gone.
Well, let's
And
hope.
he's as much as said so. In his opening speech, he said, I know I've been vocal in the past and I have been passionate about projects, but however, I'm now going to need to pass that on to other people because my role is to lead all of our people, or words to that effect.
Well,
Uh,
let's hope he sticks to it.
he will be better.
You better. Absolutely. Who's this lovely lady here?
This is the person who sang the national anthem whenever Northern Ireland were playing Wales. We drew 0-0 with them that night, quite recently, and actually should have scored later on and won. And the atmosphere at that match was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
My who is English,
Yeah.
I took her to watch a Northern Ireland match in the pub.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere was such that she used to drink wine and watch. She used to drink wine and watch Strictly Come Dancing. She now drinks beer and watches Northern Ireland play football.
You've had an influence. The country
Yes.
has had an influence there.
Yeah, right. I'm going to get this playing.
Right. On you go.
I'm just hoping it's in the right place.
Tonight's national anthem
Oh.
will be performed by Carney.
Hold on. Right, the Italian Highlands. Right. Had to leave a bit of Green White Army in.
And she made that last note effortless.
Yes, boss, no, our football players do not kneel. In this country, we kneel for the Queen or the King and to take aim. Outside of that, I've been 42. You people in the chat have been fucking excellent as always. See you next week. Good night and God bless.
Good night.
Good night.